As the curtain closed in Season 1 of Overwatch 2, you might have not gotten the rank that you wanted. Now personally, I didn't really get the rank I wanted either, so why did we not actually climb nearly as much as we wanted in Season 1? Let's break down 8 reasons why, and what we could do better to actually achieve success in Season 2 of Overwatch. Now the first thing, and this doesn't apply to everyone, but a giant percentage of the population, is we took breaks from Overwatch. A lot of us had a ton of rust when it comes to Overwatch because we were playing other games, whether that was Apex, Valorant, maybe we took a break from gaming altogether. And while other games can improve you mechanically somewhat, a lot of games really didn't teach you that much about how to get better at Overwatch specifically. Like, grinding to Immortal in Valorant didn't make me any better at Genji, like, at all. It might have actually made me worse, if I'm being honest. But the big thing that I need to point out is that when you play a lot of other games, you bring bad habits oftentimes into Overwatch. Like, for instance, my movement, I've noticed, is really bad. I've been moving in ways in Overwatch, either jumping too much or moving too statically, and it's getting me killed in a lot of fights, and I never used to move like that. But it's really hard for me to break now because I spent the past, year and a half, 2 years not playing Overwatch. And a lot of that subconscious competence that I learned back in Overwatch 1 when I grinded it a lot basically has kind of disappeared for the most part. And I have to relearn a lot of those things, and you probably do as well. And the second reason that you didn't actually climb nearly as much in Overwatch 2 is that Overwatch 2 was just a plain and simple different beast. If you came into Overwatch 2 expecting it to be just like Overwatch 1, because that's kind of what it looked like and that's what everyone said, you were in for a rude awakening, because everything in Overwatch is just not even close to the same. Some people will struggle in the new environment and some people were flourishing. Like some people that were hard stuck for a very long time in Overwatch 1 that grinded it every day. In Overwatch 2, they're already seeing higher peaks than they ever have before. And other people that were really good in Overwatch 1 are having trouble. And there's a lot of reasons for this, but it comes down to the fact that Overwatch, the things that it requires of you is different, whether it's mechanical skill, and the roles that you're supposed to take on and what you're supposed to do in those roles are slightly different as well. And a lot of the time, the same strategies that would work back in the old days, whether that's shield break, breaking down a shield, punishing out of position tanks, or going for ultimate combos over and over again and just using those only to try to win fights, those things could work and you could climb with those things pretty reliably. But with ultimates generated a lot less, shield break not really being that viable of a strategy, tanks being way stronger, you could see how the cascade of things just means that many of those old Overwatch strategies just don't work in the same way that they work in Overwatch 2. Now this leads me directly to the third thing, and that's your job on each role is different. For instance, a support is no longer able to heal and just be that heal bot nearly as much as they were before. For instance, back in Overwatch 1, you could really just pocket your tanks a lot, heal them up, keep them healed up, generate ultimates, and then go for plays here and there and counter or stop enemy plays, but you wouldn't be constantly trying to find offensive value in the same way that we're seeing right now in Overwatch 2. Not nearly as much. While maybe you were looking for plays and being proactive, maybe 30, 20% of the time, now it's like 50-50 or 60-40. And it's just a huge shift. And even back in Overwatch 1, there were a lot of supports that were not being aggressive at all. They were never going for plays. And that was one of the reasons why they couldn't climb before. And now it's one of the reasons that they might even be worse in this new environment. Or maybe they actually have improved in a lot of ways, but because they haven't shifted their actual identity or their role now going into Overwatch 2, they're not really improving, or it's not seen visibly on their rank. With DPS could get away with a lot of BS back in Overwatch 1 because you could do things that would get you guaranteed value that didn't require that much skill. Like a Hanzo that just spammed head level, broke a Ryan shield pretty reliably, built up Dragon, got to Dragon very quickly, got to grab Dragon, and that's just one of many examples where you could just play this neutral play where you're poking a lot, generating ultimates, and winning fights just off your ultimates over and over again that was actually viable. but now you have to be a lot more proactive. You have to actually go for plays, you have to actually punish enemies, bait out cooldowns, and while you did need to do those things before, you just have to do this in much different ways, and that neutral game is way different than it was back in Overwatch 1. And don't even get me started on tanks. We all know that tanks are just way different. The amount of impact you can have is higher individually, but you got nobody to bail you out. There's huge growing pains between main and off tank, and yeah, I mean, tanks just insanely different. So every single one of these roles just requires something different from you, and your job is just going to be overall different. Now, this leads me directly into the fourth reason why you're not seeing dramatic improvement coming into Overwatch 2, and it's because the game requires just much higher mechanical skill than Overwatch 1 did. For a lot of the same reasons that I talked about, having to be more proactive on supports, DPS have to be more proactive in the mid fight and can't just rely on ultimates nearly as much or poking nearly as much, and tanks require quite a bit of mechanical skill as well. Depending on the tank you're playing, it can require a ton of mechanical skill, and the thing that you need to understand is that many of the plays that you make can go right or wrong depending on your mechanics that back them up. And I'd say back in Overwatch 1, while mechanics didn't completely not matter, if you didn't have great mechanics, you could still find tons and tons of success and climb all the way up the ladder with pretty poor mechanics. And I know this because I did this. I had terrible mechanics. But in this new version of the game, new Overwatch 2, if you don't have great mechanical skill or good mechanical skill relative to your rank, you're going to start being unable to find impact in these mid fights, and you're going to start not being confident in going for these plays because you need a certain amount of mechanical competence to execute them. So if you want to enable your success for Overwatch Season 2, I would say start focusing on your mechanical skill right now. Now, the next big reason that you're not climbing is you are making the same mistakes over and over again without correction. And I'm not blaming anyone for doing this because it's super easy to do, because oftentimes you'll make a mistake and whether you get punished for it will be a bit random. Like, some enemies will see that as a mistake and actually punish you for it, being out of position, being overextended, wasting your cooldowns, but other enemies won't even see it. They won't even know to punish you. So you don't have any receptive feedback, right? You're not learning from actually making these mistakes. That's actually why it's important to be proactive with the mistakes you are being punished for. If you get punished for a mistake in a game, you need to really think about why that is. And don't just chalk it up to like, oh no, it wasn't that big of a deal, let's move on, it was just a fluke. Or, oh, I don't normally get punished for this, so I'm gonna just, ignore that 1 in 5 or 1 in 2 or 1 in 3 times that this has actually happened. But the problem is, that person that actually punished you, that is the percentage of people that are holding you back, right? And unless you can get over that mistake and not make that mistake and never get punished for that mistake, not only will you not climb, but you won't develop as a player and get better. So it's important that you really focus more on the mistakes you are getting punished for than the things you get away with. And this kind of trickles down where people really focus on the games that they play very, very well on, instead of the games that they feel like were out of their control or they played really poorly, and they just chalk that up to just randomness, or they weren't feeling it, or their team weren't enabling them. But those are the games that you really need to focus on the most. Now, next up, and this is a really, really big one, and I know that I'm guilty of this as well, it's spreading yourself too thin. Now, if you're just first learning the game and you're trying to learn every character, I want you to play every single character, every single role, really kind of absorb everything in like a sponge. But eventually, especially if you're not someone that can just play for like 12 hours a day, like you have a job or you're grinding and doing some other stuff, you can't just play like nonstop and play everything. So what I would say is focus the hours that you do have on the role and the characters you want to get good at. The reason that you do this is because it compounds your learning in that environment. So like, you are going to go through way more repetitions on the same role with the same characters than you would playing a little bit of everything. And because every single role is so different, you're learning a little bit and it kind of translates over to the other roles, but not nearly as much. And I would say that if your goal is to get good at everything, still focus on one thing first, get that to the level you're comfortable with, and then you can move to something else. Rather than raising everything up like in little beads here and there, a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there, do it so you like max out one thing and then you move on to the next thing. You want a compound of hours and time so that you're really focusing on the thing you want to get the best at. Now, the next reason that you're not climbing or you didn't climb in Season 1 is that you have no consistency. And what I mean by that is there's a percentage of games that you're playing that you are just auto-throwing. And this could be due to a lot of things. The first one is you're not properly warming up. I really encourage you to spend 10 to 30 minutes every single time before you play to warm up, because a lot of people just play that first game or that second game of the day when they're kind of not feeling it. Their shots aren't on point. They miss the vast majority of the plays and shots that they go for. And it's basically like those 2 games could just ruin your win rate. Like if you play 10 games in a day, but those first 2 games you just auto throw because you're not warmed up, then you really have to go crazy in the rest of the games in order to have a positive win rate at the end of the day, which you just can't have if you're trying to climb. So really focus on warming up. Another thing is just, proper sleep, making sure that you're not actually playing when you're dead tired. If you're doing that, you're throwing, and just be honest with yourself. Be realistic with what you would call your average or above average form. And when you start dipping below that, take a break, get some rest, go walk around, or just stop playing altogether, because you're just hurting your improvement, you're hurting your quality playtime, you're hurting your wins and losses. So yeah, I want you to develop a certain level of routine so that in Season 2, you're just more consistent in the games that you're playing. You're playing closer to your peak in every single game, and you're trying to push your peak even further and develop yourself. Now, this moves me on to the 8th thing, and this one's really hard to do, but it's important. It's playing to rank up only and not improve. And I'm not going to say that you shouldn't be playing to rank up in some regard. Like, that's why we grind it. We all want to get a high rank. But you need to understand that in order to get a rank and maintain a rank, you have to deserve it. You have to earn it. You can't cheat code your way there. Like, you could work on all these little tiny optimization tips or tricks, try to 4-stack, or just set up the perfect environment so that you have the highest chance of winning. But if you're not actually improving, then it doesn't really matter how many tricks that you adopt, because ultimately the rank will never be something that you truly deserve, nor will you be able to get it. Basically, regardless of how a play session in a day goes, whether you won more than you lost or lost more than you won, if you could use that day to improve, to learn something, to be better for the next set of games, and you can do that every single day, then the sky's the limit for your eventual progress. And this leads me to the last thing. This is a special 9th reason why, and it's don't be too hard on yourself. Maybe you didn't climb, maybe you didn't have success in this season, but you know what? There's always next season. There's always the season after that. You will get there, and eventually all the people in your current rank will basically be people that you leave far behind, and you'll achieve whatever rank you desire as long as you don't give up, you keep playing for improvement, and you try to incorporate good fundamentals. I believe in you, and you got this. But anyways, if you enjoyed the content, I really hope you smash that like and subscribe. Let me know what video you want to see next. Thank you so much for coming by, and I'll see you next time.